What if the real reason you feel sick is because you've been living in survival mode for so long that your body finally shut down?
The third piece of the puzzle is missing for a lot of people. And that's part of the reason why I'm here. A lot of people don't know that this exists, but the research says if you have the third piece of the puzzle, GI psychology, addressing the gut brain connection, that often is the missing piece to make this all work synchronistically.
What if I told you your constant stomach problems aren't coming from food at all?
If you think about your nervous system is a bucket, and your bucket can get filled with stress and going fast and just taking on, doing, and the level of the water can get raised higher and higher and higher, and at some point it will overfill and get overloaded, dysregulated. For a gut responder type person, that's going to be then your weaker link in the chain is going to be its reflux, and reflux will kick in. Or for IBS, it'll be IBS, or IBS-C, if it'll be constipation. If IBS-D, it'll be diarrhea.
Welcome to Empowering Women in Conversations, podcast to empower and uplift women by providing a safe space for them to share their stories and experiences and encourage the strength, resilience, and power of women. If you are tired of putting others' needs before your own, leading to burnout and resentment, and you are ready to transform and create relationships that are supportive rather than draining, join us on this journey of women overcoming adversities and achieving their true empowerment. Here's your host, a licensed professional counselor, Anita Sandoval.
Welcome back to Empowering Women in Conversations. I'm your host, Anita Sandoval, and today we're diving into a topic that connects so deeply to women who have lived their experiences and lives as people pleasers, constantly overgiving in relationships and feeling the effects not only emotionally, but physically. My guest today knows this journey firsthand. Dr. Scott Brower is a clinical psychologist licensed in Oregon and the founder of Rest and Digest. You can find his work at restanddigest.org, on YouTube, and Rest and Digest Guide, and on the Insight Timer. Dr. Brower specializes in the powerful intersection of mental health and digestive health, a field known as GI psychology. This is the first I've heard. So when I saw this, I had to have them in here in this episode, women over here who are listening in, because that's the number one symptom I hear we all complain about is our digestive system. And so what makes this perspective even more impactful is that he speaks not just from professional expertise, but also from personal experience. Dr. Brower, thank you for being here today. And before we dive in, I'd like for you to share a little bit about yourself, your journey, and how you came to focus on the gut-mind connection.
Great. Happy to be here. Thank you. For me, this all started in my 20s. I was in graduate school for clinical psychology, and I developed what I found out to be was Crohn's disease, which is a type of inflammatory bowel disease. It can be a severe disease, unfortunately. And I was in my 20s, as a lot of people are when you get diagnosed with this type of inflammatory condition. And unfortunately, being in my 20s, I was in a bit of a denial about it and still wanted to party and eat what I wanted to eat. And I really paid the price for that and got humbled over and over until I really took it on. For a long time, Anita, I just went the opposite way, and I tried to find every supplement, every kind of mind-body exercise, every type of diet I could find. I would overlap these diets, and it would just become this completely unlivable kind of thing where couldn't eat nightshades and couldn't eat gluten and couldn't eat dairy and all that kind of stuff. Just trying to find stability and trying to kind of heal the natural way. Really dedicated to that for a long time, overlapping too many diets. Well, this one says you can't have that, and this one says you can't have that. Butternut squash and boiled chicken, and it was not sustainable. And for me, it's been a very long path. So I'm 43 now. It's been a good number of years that I've had to figure out how to get a sustainable place of remission, which I'm in right now, which is fantastic. And it's been that for a little while now.
Wow.
And the thing that's been really interesting for me as a psychologist is that I felt I didn't leave any stone unturned. And I tried to find all the supplements and all the diets and all the things, and needing to also look at the medications as well, begrudgingly. And for a long time, that I felt I knew the main gist of what was available. And then it was 6 years ago or something that I just stumbled into. There was this field called GI psychology that I had, even as a clinical psychologist, never heard of. And I took all these health psychology courses and everything. Yeah. And the technical term for it, if we want to get fancy, is called psychogastroenterology. And psychogastroenterology, or GI psychology, is all about the mind, body, the gut brain connection.
Okay.
And there's a lot of empirical support of things that are reliably evidence-based of what can be an important piece of the puzzle for many people. And I'll just end this little summary here by saying what I've learned firsthand, but then it got presented to me when I finally found this model, is that really the people that heal the best, whether you have a disease, Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, or if you have a much more common IBS or reflux condition, the same thing applies. And the research is that the people that do the best, that stay in remission the longest and are able to get into and stay into remission, are treated from a holistic perspective. And that holistic perspective is 3 different pillars. Okay. First is medical. So it's extremely important that you are getting assessed and ruling out if there is anything that needs to be addressed, if it's beyond IBS or reflux or something like that.
Got it.
Number 2 would be diet. Diet does play a role. It can be a very helpful one. People oftentimes can overdo it and can really use the help of evidence-based guidelines or a GI-focused dietitian. Okay. But then oftentimes those 2 are known and are followed by people. The third piece of the puzzle is missing for a lot of people. And that's part of the reason why I'm here. A lot of people don't know that this exists, but the research says if you have the third piece of the puzzle, GI psychology, addressing the gut-brain connection, that often is the missing piece to make this all work synchronistically.
I love how you said that. So you were mentioning the gut-mind piece. What was that breaking point for you the moment you realized your body was screaming at you, we're done, and it connected with your mind?
What was the moment? Well, I think for me, to be real about it, is one thing I would love to get into at some point during a conversation. There's fight and flight. Everyone knows about fight and flight. Kind of you were talking about. There's also freeze and appease. And that will certainly be applying to this audience if you're listening to something about people pleasing. So if we simplify this down to 3 things, there's control types, there's accommodating types, and there's avoid types. And we all use a combination of these, but you'll tend to be one. I certainly have my people pleasy stuff, avoid conflict stuff, but I'm more of a control type. I'm much more prone to anxiety and want for order and control. So for me, how this all clicked is it just put it in my face into a real can't ignore it thing, that all of my excessive need to accomplish and my propensity for overworking and all of that, it wasn't just a little bit of I wonder if. It's no, all right, Scott, this is a clear thing you need to work on. It would be easy to want to throw more energy into the diet or striving and doing better. Yeah. And it really humbled me. All right, this is something that a lot of this that I make is about helping people to access that downregulation, sympathetic response. We can get into that. And a lot of the reason why I make it is because it's so hard for me to do it. And realistically, to do it and make it a big practice, it helps me to teach it because then I have to walk the talk. But it also helps people that also struggle to can know about it. We can have the should, but to be able to do it has its challenges.
Oh, I truly believe in compassion, because the body's used to, and I call it, it's an addictive response. What we're just eliciting is neurochemicals when it comes to emotions. Those neurochemicals go into your system. And so when they're like, oh, I really want to, be in the parasympathetic nervous system, I really want to downregulate, yet their system is so used to the stress hormones. It's like a crack addict taking away their crack and giving them white tea. And they're this junk, and the body's already used to and comfortable with the chaos that they feel so awkward and unknown with the peace. What do you do when that happens? How do we transition from acknowledging that comfort? The body's already comfortable with that addictive chemical, with the stress hormones. How do we start practicing and realizing that awareness that this is just not healthy? And even though our body craves it, it's not something, because you mentioned it. You're like, oh, I was fighting with it. I just kept going, because that's what the body's used to. Is it a transition? Is it a one day to the other? How does this work?
Let's put this in specific or practical terms for a second. We can really
digest it.
Yes.
No pun intended.
Yeah. So let's like use a hypothetical. Like with your audience, would it be, what would be like a typical thing? Would it be this kind of like
Let me tell you.
a mom or
Yes.
or go ahead.
Yes. So let's say we have mommy mode. And we're okay, we need to make sure we have dinner, but we need to make sure we're a good worker, but I want to be there for my daughter in the sports activities. Mind you, let's add neurodivergence, and their brain is all over the place. And we got to make sure the clothes are clean, and we got to make sure their homework is done. And they take this burden on themselves, not even acknowledging that their partner, male or female, it's called shared responsibilities, but mommy wants to just take the load and do everything.
Mm-hmm. Great. Fantastic. So if we were to say just the current pace of life is something working against us because it is more and more expected. Was it the Surgeon General in 2024 issued a health advisory about parenting? Very validating as a parent to hear this. Parenting these days is not what parenting used to be. And parenting used to be, and I think they used the 70s to the 80s as a comparison. It used to be the parents then would still have a social life. When they would go and hang out with friends or go do their sport or whatever, and the kids would come along and it would be, all right, kids, go play, go find some kids to play with, right? And kids would tag along. These days, some kind of thing about the expectation of excessive parenting. Now you're the driver to all the sports. You're supposed to maybe go to the PTA, PTO meetings. You're also supposed to make their lunch, make their dinners, make their breakfast, be their playmates, set up play dates.
Co-regulate with them.
Exactly.
Parents
right. There's
under
all
pressure.
this expectation,
Yes.
right? Put that in the ether here that there's a context. It's not just someone is too people pleasy and she just needs to wake up and stop being so people pleasing. There's just an element about that for sure. But kind of to come back with that noted, and the empathy factor, to recognize part of what you're saying here is it's familiar for someone that to be in mom mode and to do it all and do it all and do it all. And then you can have this, you can hear this podcast and here's this psychologist saying, hey, if you got IBS and you got this GI stuff, you really need to go lay down, take at least 10 minutes, do this diaphragmatic breathing. You really should do this because, blah, blah, blah. The reality is that for a lot of people, myself included, slowing down is quite uncomfortable. For someone with a people-pleasing coping mechanism, in its own way, guilt doesn't feel good, but it feels familiar.
Yeah.
And there's a familiarness that in its own way can feel safe. Look at me being a good person. Look at me doing it all. For me, in this being more of the control anxious type, anxiety doesn't feel good, but it feels safe. Oh, I'm doing everything I should be. Look at me accomplishing and doing all this stuff. I'm a good person.
Yes. You want to know what the phrase is that mamas use?
What's that?
Look at me being productive.
Yes, exactly. Look how productive. So exactly. So the rest is going to threaten that. For someone that maybe is predisposed to feeling guilty, they're going to feel lazy, maybe, and they're going to feel I'm not doing what I should be doing, or making excuses, or look at that person, they don't need to rest, or or that in some way, maybe, I don't know if it would even be a belief, but there might be a feeling belief of somehow being a burden.
Yes, and I'm not
You
good
know?
enough is one of the common
Yeah.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So with all that said, to me, it's much more about awareness
Okay.
and validation of
Okay.
like, there's in the what's called the autonomic nervous system,
Okay.
which is autonomic, automatic, all the things that you don't consciously have to think about controlling: your heartbeat, your blood pressure, digestion. You don't have to will yourself to digest. Those are all covered by the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system has three different parts. There's the sympathetic, fight and flight, gas pedal. There's the parasympathetic, brake pedal, rest and digest. And then, important for us, there's also what's called the enteric nervous system, which is the separate, some people call it the second brain, which is really when we talk about there's a gut brain connection, that's what the gut is essentially. It's this humongous vast array of nerves that are lining the whole intestinal tract. And there's more nerves, there's hundreds of millions of nerves. There are more nerves lining your digestive tract that there are in your spinal cord.
Oh my
And it's the
God.
only, it's this amazing thing and it's the only separate part of the nervous system that can function on its own. Everything else needs the brain to direct it. This enteric nervous system that drives digestion is its own separate brain in a way.
So
And
gut
so
instinct
those two
really is a
exactly
thing?
gut instinct and butterflies in my stomach, I didn't have a good gut feeling about that. All those frameworks of speech are implicitly pointing to this thing. In any case, with those things defined, being in mom mode, being productive, doing it all, you get into what's called the sympathetic dominant place, where it's very comfortable and familiar for you to be hitting the gas pedal all the time. But that's going to directly impair your ability to digest, and also so you think about your digestive system, but also your reproductive system and your immune system are not needed for immediate survival, right? And so that's what that sympathetic nervous system is all about, the immediate survival. So you're impairing at a base level your ability to digest and your immune system, your reproductive system as well. And so when we don't slow down, when we don't rest, that gets impaired. But to your point, right, we could say all day long, what you really should take 10 minutes, or at the end of the day, slow down and take some time for yourself. But the reality is that's going to be, for a lot of people, emotionally uncomfortable, right? They're going to have a stimulation withdrawal. They're going to want to be on their phone at least, right? Right. And so it's hard
of something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. And one of the things I tell my patients, how do we know sympathetic or parasympathetic? S equals stress. P equals peace. So am I stressed out? That's sympathetic. Am I in peace? Then that's parasympathetic. And what happens when we're stressed out? The blood vessels constrict. And where does the blood go? In the muscles for fighting or for running away, which is in the arms and the limbs. So we don't need the stomach to survive. And that's why usually it's the first thing to really get dysregulated, because we don't need blood to flow there. And what happens when we constrict something and squeeze the blood out of it and it starts breaking down? You're not giving it enough oxygen and blood flow. So if they're comfortable with this stress, they're comfortable with not having that blood flow, what would be a baby step of awareness for them?
So in this example, would this person also be struggling with GI stuff, or do you want to keep it more?
So most of my audience here, it's reflux, it's diverticulitis, it's IBS for sure. Whether it's IBS or IBS-C, it's usually any one of those as well.
Okay, cool. So it's helpful to put this in context then. Anyone that is experiencing those things is probably what's called a gut responder. A gut responder is someone that if you push someone, if you think about your nervous system is a bucket, and your bucket can get filled with stress and going fast and just taking on, doing, and the level of the water can get raised higher and higher and higher, and at some point it will overfill and get overloaded, dysregulated. For a gut responder type person, that's going to be then your weaker link in the chain is going to be its reflux, and reflux will kick in. Or for IBS, it'll be IBS, or IBS-C, if it'll be constipation. If IBS-D, it'll be diarrhea. That your stereotypical symptoms, your physical symptoms will kick in when that bucket's overflowing. Two important things to know about the bucket is the bucket is your nervous system. Is you can expand or contract the size of the bucket. It's not set. And so if you think about sleep is one of the biggest factors. If you everyone knows what it's to sleep really well and then not sleep well and have a really not much buffer. And everyone you're a little irritable, things get to you more. That bucket is much smaller at that point. And so you have two levers to think about here. You can increase and decrease the size of the bucket, what's called the window of tolerance. Or you can be focusing on how much water is coming into the bucket. So all of that to say that there are gut responders, but this applies to everyone else as well. If you're not a gut responder, maybe you get migraines, maybe you get headaches. Maybe that's where the bucket overflows for you. Maybe your skin breaks out. Maybe that's where your bucket overflows, or inflammation,
joint pain.
Exactly. Everyone will have some way in which physically the overflowing, the dysregulation of the nervous system is going to affect them. And that's their flashing sign that, hey, this is not, something needs to change, because if you push through it, it's not going to go well. And so we'll just talk about the gut responders. So we'll talk about IBS, the most common. Reflux also is quite common. Reflux.
So common. Gastritis and reflux are top beginners. And then after that, then I see the IBS and the divert. I feel like it's increasing and getting worse and worse when it's not being paid attention to. And so might have started as reflux or gastritis maybe in their 20s or teenage years. And then by the time they're 30s and 40s, it just exasperated into something that it's not manageable and they can barely leave the house. So that's from what I see.
And so that exactly speaks something that's really important and helpful to know about specifically. Let's say there's two main topics here we're talking about. There's GI issues, and then there's, we'll just say, called stress. And you can have the stress be focused as people pleasing, the struggle of managing guilt, and also the darker side that probably don't want to acknowledge, which is resentment, right? Of giving away and doing all the time, right? But in any case, we'll just call that stress, right? So there's the external stressors of parenting or doing or work or conflict in relationships, and then there's the internal stress of the emotional, navigation of all that. And the other side, let's say there's the physical manifestation, the GI issues. So on the GI issue side, it's important to recognize that there's two different types of GI issues, two main classes. There's what have been called functional GI disorders, and then there's like what's called organic diseases. What I have Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. Gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, is also within this.
Yes, GERD.
But the thing to note, let's stay with the first group, what has been called functional GI disorders. How many years? 9 years ago, and I think they officially updated the term of this, and it's called, a mouthful, but it's a useful term to know. It's called disorders of the gut-brain interaction. So IBS is a disorder of the gut-brain interaction, DGBI, and it's a really useful thing to know, because that is speaking to what is the mechanism. You want to know what the mechanism here is. Right? And so the mechanism is a dysregulation between the gut and the brain. And so going back to the bucket metaphor, a lot of people with IBS there'll be something that initially started the IBS process to begin with. Overflowed, there's a big splash into the bucket and overflowed, and IBS started. So let's say food poisoning you know,
Okay.
or a bad infection. Or
Okay.
maybe you're like family member died and you were like moving also, like huge life events, all, you know, overloading the system. There's a number of
Holidays.
things.
Just
Holidays.
coming around the corner. Just saying. I'm feeling it already.
Yeah.
Holidays.
If
Yes.
you stack enough things psychologically or physically, it can tip you over. And IBS is a very common thing to get tipped into. Initial and maybe excessive antibiotic use. There's a lot of things that can tip you into this process. But the thing that's more important to recognize is there's what started this isn't usually what keeps it going.
Okay.
So what keeps it going is what's called gut-brain dysregulation. And so gut-brain dysregulation, there are like four main kind of factors of what keeps this going. It's really helpful and important for people to understand if this is not just a little passing thing, if this is really an issue for you and it's getting in the way of your life, to really understand what are these factors of gut-brain dysregulation. And I'll just say them a bunch of them briefly, the most common ones.
Okay.
So let's say you're a typical person with IBS. IBS is a pain condition. So the 3 months of pain, abdominal pain, that
Okay.
usually is correlated to bowel movements. Either it makes it worse or it makes it better. And there's these changes in motility, too much constipation, too much diarrhea, or alternating between the two of them. But
Okay.
usually it's a combination of abdominal pain plus that
Yes.
for a long enough period of time.
Yes.
If you don't have pain, you're still within a disorder of a gut-brain interaction. It's just not technically IBS, but the same stuff applies. When that happens and you get shifted into that place of your gut-brain connection is dysregulated. The gut and the brain, they're having conversation all the time. They're talking on their phones, and the signal goes bad and they can't hear each other that well, and the signals get distorted, they get amplified, the conversation is not clear and
Yeah.
regulated anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And so when the brain can't talk to the enteric nervous system, the gut, well, and the other way around, then these signals get distorted. And one of the very practical, important ways to know what that pain is about. The pain is almost always based on something called visceral hypersensitivity. If you think about IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, it's a syndrome, meaning it's not a disease. It's a collection of symptoms that are caused by many different things.
Okay.
And one of the main things that it's caused by is this visceral hypersensitivity. The irritable in irritable bowel syndrome is pointing to the nerves in the enteric nervous system, the nerves in the lining of the GI tract, in the intestines, have become more irritable. They've been sensitized. When you feel the pain, you know, especially pain that gets worse or better with a bowel movement, what's happening there is there's nothing physically wrong. There's nothing, usually pain signals danger. Oh crap, what's wrong? Have they missed something? These tests come back and they say nothing's wrong, but I feel this pain. What's actually, is something wrong with me?
Yes. That's the common what they tell me.
Exactly. And they feel often people feel
Like, I'm not crazy. Am I crazy?
dismissed. Is it in your head? Exactly.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And so those nerves have become hypersensitive, and understanding that's what's actually going on. There's ways to work with that and then find ways to come back and regulate the brain gut
The system.
gut brain connection. Sorry. And I'll say a couple other factors real quick.
Yes.
So we have visceral hypersensitivity. That's a change, that physical, real, measurable change that happens in the digestive system and the digestive tract. The change in motility, as we also said, that is a factor of gut brain dysregulation. On the brain side, there are these changes that happen functionally where usually, you know, if you're listening to this podcast and maybe you have jewelry on, maybe you probably, until I said these words, you probably didn't notice the weight, the feel, the contact of the jewelry on your skin. But now if you notice it, you can feel it. I can feel my
Yeah.
rings on my hand
Yeah.
now. But before that, it was filtered out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so for people with gut brain dysregulation, we start to lose the ability to filter out gut signals. And so it's on our mind more. We start to pay attention to it more. when normally there's a lot moving through. There's gas and food moving through our system all the time. There's a lot of
Yes.
signals coming through. Normally we don't even, it's not even in our conscious awareness, but because it's not being filtered out, it's on our, we're experiencing it more. And I'll say the last thing, there's also a change in our mental, emotional, and behavioral patterns. So
Okay.
it's much easier to start to get anxious. It's much easier to get hypervigilant, to really
Okay.
be scanning the body a lot more.
Okay.
It's a lot easier to start to catastrophize of how bad this is going to be, because a lot of this stuff is unpredictable, and unpredictability and uncertainty is fuel for anxiety. And so we get
Yeah.
to start to catastrophize how bad it's going to be. And then you can start to avoid and cancel plans. And then that starts this really vicious cycle of avoiding. And then it can get really amplified from there.
Wow. And it keeps the momentum going with the stress chemicals.
Yes,
And we need a disrupt to go from sympathetic to para.
exactly.
And you mentioned polyvagal. Can you tell the audience and the listeners what is polyvagal and how does this help do that disrupt within the system?
Oh, Anita. I gonna really try to not geek too hard here. I'm gonna try and like keep
Don't worry, I add visuals. So don't worry, I add
Oh, really?
visuals.
Awesome.
Yes, because this
Okay.
is video recorded and also audio, but I add visuals here. So for those of you that are listening,
Very cool.
look at the YouTube. I'm adding visuals.
Very cool. Okay. Well, no, not everyone is geeky as us about this stuff. So I'll try and keep it simple. And then I know you know a lot about this. So I'll keep it sparse and you join in where you think would be good to expand.
Okay.
So polyvagal theory is a framework. It's an evolutionary hypothesis that we have the vagus nerve, polyvagal. The vagus nerve is the main highway that we are stimulating and accessing to be able to shift into rest and digest, downregulate, safety, calm mode. And a lot of people with IBS and a lot of these other disorders have what's called low vagal tone. The strength of our vagus nerve, it's called like the vagal brake, the ability to brake and slow down, is just like exercising muscles. When you don't use something, it becomes weak over time. There's a lot of hypotheses about that. There's a lot of different perspectives about that, but that's the gist of things. And so polyvagal theory is an interesting thing that branches out a little bit further, and it talks about that us humans, we are not that fast of an animal. We are not that fierce of an animal. We don't have, our teeth are not that sharp. We don't have sharp claws. We are weak and slow and vulnerable as animals, right? But strangely, we've taken over the world and we've dominated. We are the apex predator. And
Wow.
how is that the case? Because we have extremely sophisticated ways of co-regulating, connecting with other people, and banding together as a tribe. And so in some ways, there is a Darwinian evolution of the survival of the fittest. That does maybe make sense for birds, but for people, where our strength is not our ability to run and fight as much, it's to band together, to coordinate, to our ability to have language. All right, now I'm getting a little geeky. I'll just say our ability to do all that stuff has really excelled us. And so the natural ability to connect and co-regulate in an ideal world, it would be safe to be vulnerable, to be open, to have emotional needs. And you would be in this, what's called the ventral vagal mode, this kind of safe to nurture and be nurtured and co-regulate. And everything isn't okay. I'm really having a hard time with the holidays and everything that's going on with the planning. And I'm not okay.
Yeah.
Be able to be vulnerable. And I have been saying yes, and I don't even want to acknowledge it, but I'm feeling really friggin' resentful that they keep doing this and just to be, and that we really can then process a lot of our internal tension and emotions that way. Right?
Yes. For women out there, polyvagal is this primitive nerve that we have, and it's the highway from the gut to the mind. And it's the easy access when there's stress, there's a congestion there. And using the polyvagal is a quick reset to downregulate your nervous system using exercises that are specific within the polyvagal system. So I know people talk about sympathetic system and parasympathetic nervous system, but when you hit the polyvagal system, that can really help you regulate. And that's what I heard is that's our superpower that we do have, is that we can be able to shift from a state of distress to a state of relief. We really just need to know how and not get addicted to those stress hormones.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so that's the ideal is
Yeah.
what's called ventral vagal,
Yeah.
co-regulate, connect, vulnerability, openness, and all that stuff. That ultimately is the ideal because that is a place where I don't have it all together.
Yeah.
And I can feel safe in just being a human and being stressed, being dysregulated. And that actually helps me work through it better. That's what therapy can be really helpful for, is helping people access and understand what is that place of being safe when everything isn't okay, right? And to actually have the capacity to process the feelings that are going on underneath all that stuff. But in reality, knowing that is a place where it's quite useful and positive and regulating for the gut-brain connection, because when safety is there, that's when the vagus nerve gets more active and parasympathetic, and you kind of get out of the way of digestion all working properly. But to put this in realistic perspectives, that's if we say there's 3 zones, there's the top of the zone. We might have a visual for this maybe.
Yes.
There's the top visual of this green zone of safety, felt sense of safety. Below that, though, is what's called the sympathetic nervous system, which we've been talking about already. It's fight or flight. And we can, I don't know what you call it. I don't know what your visual will be, but something like a yellow, orange.
I think of it as a street light, green.
Yes,
yellow.
exactly. Right. And that is this go, go, go mom mode, as you were saying before, productivity mode, do, go, 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 all that stuff. No one can sustain that chronically. You're going to start to have health problems. You're going to start to have relationship problems. You're going to have that stuff. And then at some point, a lot of people then will start to burn out and then go into what's called the dorsal vagal, this shutdown, hypoarousal. Exactly. So it's kind of numbing out, checking out, escaping, disengaging, because the pace of it is just, it's not bearable to live in that constantly. If you can't find your way up to safety, oftentimes this is the zone of depression and checking out and hopelessness and helplessness and all that.
Yes.
And so there's those 3 different levels where a nervous system can be. And certainly the middle or the bottom, you're going to have, it's very common to have GI issues. If someone is struggling with anxiety or depression, they're much more likely to have GI issues. At the same time, if you have GI issues, you're much more likely to have anxiety and depression. And it's easy to get stuck in any of those 2 different modes.
Let me ask you this, because this is common in people pleasers. The bread and butter of people pleasers are narcissists. And they come to me wanting to heal, but still stay in the relationship with a toxic person. What is your advice to that?
Let me understand this a little bit more. In what you often see is there's someone coming to you and saying, hey, this is just not going well. I'm stressed out. I'm anxious. My health is paying the price.
Yes.
And this person is just deflective, defensive, dismissive. It's all about them. They don't want to hear it.
I do
that kind of
so
a thing.
much and always give. They still want me to sacrifice to show my love. They're out there gallivanting around. They're out there drinking. They're out there not doing their shared roles. And I still give enough. And it's never enough. And I have all these issues, GI issues, and they want me to help them be calm, but they still want to stay in that toxic relationship. What is a realistic advice I can tell them?
Yeah. My perspective, and I'm sure you have a lot to say on this. My perspective is it's understandable. It's easy on the outside to say, hey, this person's toxic. This person's a narcissist. You deserve better. But that's not real life. Everyone has flaws. Part of the beauty and the advantage of someone that is self-sacrificing is that's their default. They tend to be a little bit more over-accommodating,
Yes.
right? They will tend to attract, right,
Yeah.
the other side.
Yeah.
And part of the beauty of this is that those people tend to be pretty empathic people. There's a self-sacrificing out of feeling guilty and not wanting to feel, selfish themselves and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But at the same time, they often have a lot of empathy. And a lot of times what I've seen is these people that are in relationship to a narcissistically defended person is they see the little boy inside,
They do.
right? They see what that narcissistic defense is really covering over that maybe no one else sees or really no one else knows. And so they
Yes.
selectively see the good in that person.
Yes.
But unrealistically into their own, is hope that
Praise.
maybe
Yeah. Yeah.
and if I could show him love enough or her, and
Yes.
then I can help them, be themselves and be, all this kind of stuff. But it's excessively taking responsibility,
Yeah.
right, for the other person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so what I would say is, and if they're coming and saying, you know what, I'm leaving them, I don't know if I want to leave them or not, but I'm stressed out. This is taking its toll on me. Something's got to change.
Yeah.
What framework would be to me and you. We're talking about therapy. This is confidential. Nothing's going to leave this room.
Yeah.
And that let's get real and just get honest here.
Yeah.
That you're pissed off. There's if they're talking about these things in this way, there's at least some degree of resentment that has built up.
Yes, for sure. Yes.
And a lot of times that's a dangerous and uncomfortable emotion for people
Definitely.
because anger is scary and anger might lead to conflict or maybe anger gets stuffed and stuffed and stuffed until it blows up. So they don't have a relationship with healthy anger. Or if they've seen maybe their mom or their dad growing up was angry all the time and they have this fear about, I don't want to be an angry person.
Yeah, or their mom was
Right.
always a people pleaser and you couldn't show anger. We have to be appeasing at all times.
Exactly.
And it's
Exactly.
selfish and we're bad if we even show anger. And
Exactly.
it's working with that mindset, I guess, in the beginning of, okay, well, we can't fix this, but what can we fix? What can we control? And giving them that space of knowing what they can control to release at least 5% or 10% of that pressure that is holding in their gut or in their system.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you process that guilt, if you process that resentment, you got it. Exactly. That would be, and that's actually coming back to the bucket metaphor here. That's actually really important to remember here. There's a threshold. There's a threshold of if you get above, if your stress levels get above this threshold and you start to overflow, then your symptoms kick in. And then you start all this gut-brain dysregulation stuff about the nerves get sensitive. And then that sensitivity starts this vicious cycle and you get stuck in the cycle. Our job, thankfully, realistically, as humans, is that you don't have to cure this stuff. You don't have to have the perfect diet. You don't have to have the perfect relationship. You don't have to be sleeping, the perfect and do your meditation every morning and eat the right diet and only egg whites, whatever the thing is at the moment. That you just need to get below the threshold.
Yes.
You just need to drop below and your body can do it. Your body wants to digest and be regulated. We just need to get out of the way enough below that threshold. And if, just like you're saying, if you can process and turn towards that guilt, work with these underlying feelings, process and work with this anger, resentment, or fear of anger or resentment, that is oftentimes a big chunk of what can get you below that threshold.
I love that. And one of the common things I always tell them is choose your pain. How much pain are you willing to endure? And let's look and explore that pain. And that's the threshold we start working on. It's okay, this pain or this pain, where can we work on? And so I love how you said that. And Dr. Rauer, this has been such an eye-opening conversation. And I know many women here are realizing, whoa, people pleasing really has a lot of these gut issues. And before we wrap up, I'd love for you to share where listeners can connect with you, learn more about your work, and access your resources.
Probably the easiest place would just be to go to restanddigest.org.
Okay.
So it's rest and digest spelled out.org. I'm also have some stuff on Insight Timer, which is a popular meditation app. There's a lot more than just meditation, but there's a course on there that helps you understand the GI stress cycle, which
Okay.
is stress starts a vicious cycle that often keeps people stuck with GI issues.
Okay, and I'll put these in the show notes, so don't worry. You don't have to be like, where, what? It's going to be in the show notes. And for those of you that want to learn more, Dr. Rauer does have a free resource called The Beginner's Guide to the Gut-Brain Connection. And in there, you'll discover why stress and anxiety can flare your symptoms, the 3 pillars, as he discussed earlier previously, of digestive healing, and how to activate your body's natural rest and digest mode. You can also grab it at restanddigest.org. I will provide that in the show notes. And so, usually before I finish, I always like to ask my guests a couple of questions just so that my listeners could just get a little bit more of insight from your brain. My question to you is, what is your definition of an empowered woman?
What's an empowered woman? I can't help but be a little sappy here. My wife, I think would be a fantastic version of an empowered woman, and I just love her so much because she, little brag about my wife, she
Mhm.
was a figure skater, Canadian national champion figure skater earlier in her life, and that was a really amazing thing for her. She had to travel the world. She was on Disney on Ice and did a lot of amazing things with that. But as you can imagine, similar to gymnastics, there's a lot of very toxic things in that community. Eating disorders are not only encouraged, they're pretty much demanded.
Wow.
Um, and she has done so much healing, and she has this amazing capacity to be this badass that's up at 6 o'clock in the morning working out most days just to try and not work out is her thing. But that's easy for her, is to focus on physical fitness and all that stuff. Really, I've seen so much vulnerability and her working through a lot of anxiety and fear in her path to becoming a mom and not knowing if she was going to have what it takes to be a loving,
Oh,
nurturing mom. And Anita, she kills it. Her and my daughter are bonded. I'm often third wheel. That she doesn't want daddy around. She wants
yeah.
mommy time. And this is not a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
She's 7 now, and I love the empowered woman in my mind is someone that has the capacity to be bold and assertive when needed, but also have this flexibility of being loving and nurturing and something that women are so much more evolved
Yeah.
in being able to do.
And be vulnerable, to know your flaws, but be compassionate towards it, to heal from it. That is beautiful. Thank you. And my second question, let's assume in the future, everything, your work, your legacy that you've been working on was lost by your family due to unforeseen event. And one day within the future, by 3 family generations, within your daughter's lineage, they're found one handwritten letter to your future great 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 granddaughter. What truth would you want to bestow on her to inspire other women to continue empowering one another?
Oh my gosh, these are deep questions. Um, all right. So what would if I could leave just one letter behind for future generations, especially,
Yeah, your great great granddaughter.
yeah, let me think here.
So, yeah,
In these, it feels kind of hallmarky, but
I
um,
love it. I'm very sappy, so go for it. Us, my women audience are hello, we're people pleasers. We're very sappy.
yeah,
Yeah,
I will
go for
say
it.
from a man,
Hmm.
especially that as a man that works with people professionally heal, the thing that I would really want the future lineage, future generations to know and to have would be just to understand the importance of the permission to feel, because it is so easy to cover over and go fast and be distracted. And we have so much intelligence, but it's also the place where it's tender, it's vulnerable. And I would just hope that people in the future, and my daughters and all that, would have just the recognition and knowing the power and the importance of the permission to feel.
Thank you for that. Even for us audience, have that permission to feel, being numbed out, disengaged, and not even allowing that space for us to feel what we feel and be okay with that, whether it be resentment or anger or stress. So thank you for saying that. Thank you to all the listeners for showing up for yourself in this space, because every time you choose awareness, you're choosing empowerment. Thank you, Dr. Rauer, for sharing your wisdom here, allowing us to know that our gut isn't just about food, it's about boundaries, stress, how much we give ourselves away, and how much we can actually heal just within ourselves by downregulating and allowing space to just be us. And until next time, stay safe, be well, and remember, your voice matters, your boundaries matter, and you matter.
Thanks for listening to Empowering Women in Conversations. This conversation has ended, but your journey to empowerment continues. Please share with someone you know who will find this conversation helpful and inspiring. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until our next empowered conversation with your host, licensed professional counselor, Anita Sandoval. And remember, we are brave, we are strong, we are compassionate, we are women empowered. Go out there and claim your power.